Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, which started the day that lockdown did, because Jenna Blum and I decided that we were not going to let bookstores keep their doors shuttered. We weren't going to let authors who missed their tours not have some kind of way to get together with readers, and we wanted to enrich the lives of readers as well. So today is really special. I'm really excited. We have Angie Kin. And Happiness Falls, I'm sorry it's coming out on the screen upside down. I don't know how to fix that. But the good news is that we do have Angie Kin. Her book is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And I actually first knew about Angie for her first book, which I absolutely loved. So let me tell you a little bit about Angie, and then I'll give you some of the raves and stuff about her new book, and then we'll talk. So Angie Kim moved as a preteen from Seoul, South Korea to the suburbs of Baltimore. After graduating Interlochen Arts Academy, she studied philosophy at Stanford and attended Harvard Law School, where she was an editor of the Harvard Law Review. I love it that you were a lawyer. There's so much to talk about with that. Her debut novel, Miracle Creek, which was just fabulous, won the Edgar Award, the ITW Thriller Award, the Strand Critics Award, and the Pinkley Prize, and was named one of the best books of the year by Time, the Washington Post, Kirkus, and the Today Show. One of Variety Magazine's inaugural 10 storytellers to watch. Angie has written for New York Times Book Review, the Washington Post, Vogue, Glamour, and many, many more. So let's talk about this book a little bit first, and then we'll talk to Angie. So in this book, so much of this book is really about race, siblings, parents, communication, and what it really means to be happy and to understand another person. It's about a very verbally astute young woman, Mia, when her father and her younger brother, Eugene, who is neurodivergent, go off one day, and only Eugene comes back, and he does not speak, so they don't know what happened to the father. Mia suspects something terrible happened to her father, and the novel is about finding out the why of that, and it's also about a whole lot more. Washington Post raves, a deliciously brainy new thriller. Oh, the Oprah magazine says, with unexpected humor and aching tenderness, Kim forces us to reckon with our notions of family, happiness, and ability. So welcome, Angie Kin. You're in Barnes and Noble, right?
Yes, I am. I'm coming to you live from Barnes and Noble, Philadelphia.
This is wonderful. Everybody, you can buy Angie's book at Barnes & Noble. You can buy it at, I put up a link for bookshop.org. You can buy it wherever books are sold. You should buy both her books because they're wonderful. I also want to tell people out there, we already have Kim O'Connor Rudder. Thank you. We want people to comment and to ask questions, and we'll get to them later. Okay, so my first question is about, you had this great quote in one of your essays. It said, "I write when I don't understand something, to work through something painfully perplexing." I love that quote because so many times people say, write what you know, and it's really, that's kind of boring. You should write what you want to know. So what I wanted to know was the inception. I know the answer, but I want you to tell readers who don't. What was the inception story for this book? What was it that you wanted to know?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I get into that, can I just thank you so much for having me. And that introduction, it was so wonderful. Thank you so much. And I love A Mighty Blaze, and I just feel like you guys did such an amazing job of making writers feel less alone, when our books were coming out. And I'm coming back to that. And your question actually brings me back to that point because it was such a hard time for all of us.
Horrible time.
And it's just wonderful to feel this connection and the sense of community that we do. And you guys really did so much to bring that to authors. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for having me and for that amazing introduction.
You're so
amazing.
Welcome. You're so amazing. Welcome. You are amazing. Okay. So
so the question. So the origin point of this is And the thing that I didn't know has to do with my experience as an immigrant. So I
Mhm.
am a Korean immigrant. I came from Korea when I was 11 years old. And I overnight went from feeling like a smart girl who with lots of friends and, very gregarious and all that kind of stuff to not being able to speak at all because I couldn't speak English. And I realized at that point how essential oral communication is in our society because I felt stupid overnight. Even though there was a really good reason why I couldn't speak English, I felt stupid and I was treated that way. And so I had this deep shame as well as frustration from not being able to speak the language. And it really made me, realize and I started questioning myself and the society. Like, why do we have this deep-seated assumption that equates oral fluency with
Mhm.
intelligence? Why do we do it? Like, we do it not just for immigrants, we do it for everyone. People who stutter, people who are deaf mute, people who have aphasia or some other medical condition or anything like that, people with autism. We we ha- we make that immediate leap that there must be something cognitively not quite as fluent, and then the people who are speaking like a mile a minute, like those characters on the West Wing, we do the opposite. We assume that they must be smart because they're
Mhm.
talking so fast and using such big words. And so it really started this lifelong quest to sort of try to figure out why do I feel this way? Why do other people feel this way? Why do I still to this day sometimes get frustrated with and question my parents because they still speak English with this halting accent and, syntax errors and things like that, even though I know that they're brilliant people. So,
Mhm.
why do I do that? And so that's when I turned to write this book. This book is Happiness Falls, is about a family in crisis. And it starts when the father of this biracial Korean American family goes missing one day. And the only person who might know what happened to him is 14-year-old Eugene, who is a non speaker by virtue of having something called Angelman syndrome, a rare genetic condition. So the family really has to come together to figure out what Eugene knows and how to communicate with him and connect with him. And that process helped me to try to understand that question.
Okay, so I love I absolutely love your response because also anybody, even if you're just shy or quiet,
Yes.
people sometimes assume that you have no personality or you're stupid or you have nothing to say. So it's always, I think it comes from the American desire for no one to be different, which is a ridiculous thing to actually want. So I want to talk about Eugene, who was, I don't want to give anything away, but he just, oh my God, at the end of the book, I just
Mm.
felt broken apart and put back together again. I would love it if you would tell us about Angelman syndrome. One of the things about Angelman is they smile. People who have
Yes.
it, they smile. So they seem happy all the time, which is not the case. So tell us about this syndrome and how is it usually treated?
Yeah. So Angelman syndrome is a rare genetic disorder. And, um, the people who have it, it's a spectrum, just like anything else. And so the people who have Angelman syndrome, who are sort of more on the more affected side, have tons of motor issues and also can't speak. And then the people who are less affected, kind of like Eugene, who has a version called mosaic Angelman syndrome, he can't speak either, but he can, with lots and lots of therapies, was able to learn how to jump and walk and run and all of that sort of stuff. And the thing that characterizes Angelman syndrome and why some people call it the happiness syndrome sometimes,
Hmm.
is that they do have this persistent smile and they laugh a lot, people with the syndrome. So a lot of people think, oh, well, that must mean that they're really happy.
Happy.
So, so there are some genetic fixes kind of like in the works, but it's interesting because people have raised the question, well, do we really want to pursue genetic quote unquote cures for this? Because why do we want to? Because isn't our aim for our children, don't we always say we want them to be just happy first and
Oh,
foremost?
we
And
do.
so, yeah, so if
We
they're
do.
already happy, then why do we want to fix that? And so it's brought up some of these psychological sort of debates and like ethical debates about what it means to be happy and what we truly want for our children. Because and that's some of the conversations that some of the characters have in Happiness Falls too.
Right, right, right. It's a very strange situation because when you say we want our kids to be happy, that sort of veers into the next part of the book, which is, I forget who it was, but one of your reviews was raving that this is a book that can actually get you thinking about your life and change your life, which is how we think about happiness. And there's something in the book, I don't want to give anything away, but I do want to somehow like weasel in and talk around it, the happiness quotient and our baseline happiness and the ways we think about happiness versus the way we have this whole happiness industry around us that says, oh, you can be much happier if you write down gratitude. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. In
I
fact,
loved it all.
oh, thank you. Yeah, in fact, the my working title for the book was Happiness Quotient.
Right.
And that's one of the titles of one of the sections in the book. And so one of the characters is obsessed, and I it's not a spoiler to say the missing father, actually
Right.
the family comes to find out, is obsessed with happiness theories. And he was, and they didn't know about this until after he went missing, but he was obsessed with trying to quantify happiness,
Right.
put a number to it, and to try to, raise your happiness levels, raise his family's happiness levels. And how do we do that? So his theory was that your happiness level is really a quotient. It's your
Hmm.
experience divided by your expectations. So he was sort of thinking, well, if I can lower my family's expectations, like let's say we're going to a movie tomorrow or a restaurant, and I lower their expectations and make them think, oh, it's going to be horrible and awful and bad, then they'll be pleasantly surprised, and the experience,
Oh my God.
their happiness level will be raised, right? And
Right.
then he comes to find out, yes, but if you do that, tomorrow you might be happier, but today is going to suck because you're going to be thinking like, oh, I'm going to this horrible movie tomorrow, or I'm going to have to eat bad food tomorrow, or whatever it is. And so he kind of he makes that into something a little bit different,
Right.
and he makes that into actually the thing you have to divide your expectations, your experience by, is not your expectations, but your baseline, what you think of as your life. So if you are used to always going to mediocre restaurants, then if you go to an amazing, restaurant, then your happiness level is going to be that much higher. And I thought about that a lot with respect to this book coming out,
Hmm.
because I was like, I don't want to keep my expectations low. I don't want to think to myself like, oh, people are going to hate this book, or I'm going to get all horrible reviews, because that's kind of a bummer, right? And you want to have
Right. Right.
hopes and dreams for your book and fantasize and all of that sort of fun stuff. But I really tried to keep in mind that my baseline, that I should be comparing everything I'm going through right now to, is me as that writer before I had an agent, before I had a book
Oh,
deal.
that's lovely.
When you start a story and you have no idea if you're even going to be able to finish it, that is the baseline. that I should be comparing everything to. And that way, when I was looking at the finished copy of my book in my hand, like the day before it came out, no matter what happened, that was what I truly wanted. Like, I desperately wanted a book that I had finished and that was coming out. And then, like things like the GMA seal and and the Barnes and Noble book club seal, like those are all like amazing things that I didn't even know existed back then. So, I mean, it was just, it just really did raise my happiness levels to think of it in that way instead of just focusing on like, what am I going to get? And are people going to like give me bad reviews or good reviews,
You know what? That is such a lovely thing to say. I was just talking with another writer, and we were talking about, like publicity and promotion, and all the things you have to do and worry about. And then it struck me, or I thought, you know what? The part that I like the best is when I'm writing. And it's just so wonderful to be writing a book and it's going to come out, but it's just being in the process. And as soon as I thought that, then I felt happier. I thought, like,
Yes.
why should I kill myself worrying about this other stuff? So that's a wonderful way to think about your life. Are you still thinking that way in terms of your life?
Absolutely. I'm trying to do that as much as possible. And you really have to in order to, I think, in order to sort of like raise awareness. And I know a
Right.
lot of people do like gratitude, and I'm not very good at doing those, just because I kind of roll my eyes at it a little bit. But I do think that just remembering my origin point, remembering my baseline,
Yes.
and one of the characters says it in the book, like, is it as easy as like, like thinking about that every time you brush your teeth, 3 times a day? I do think that there's something to that. The more you can sort of like practice thinking of your baseline, not as like yesterday you, but like the 10-year ago you,
Right. Right.
and really remembering that what you have right now is something that 10-year-old you, or 10-year ago you desperately wanted. You want what you have. You
You want what you
remembering
have.
you
That's
want
isn't it
what you
I love that. You want what you have.
have. Yeah,
That's like
right?
completely wonderful. You also said that you didn't want this book to be read as a how to. So you sort of made up, well, it's not that you made up, but you finessed therapies that are used now for people who have this syndrome. Like you said, PPT, one of the therapies, is something you made up.
Yeah.
How did you get to making that up?
Yeah, so PPT is a therapy that's used in the book, and it's not just for people with Angelman syndrome. My character also has autism, and
Right,
I
right.
actually work with and teach creative writing to a bunch of non-speakers in,
That's
real
cool.
life.
Mm-hmm.
And they most of them have autism. So, just because like Angelman syndrome is just so rare. So, um it really works for a lot of people who are non-speaking and who have been assumed their entire lives to be cognitively deficient in some way. And so here are these people who their entire lives were assumed to be truly nonverbal, meaning
Mm-hmm.
without words, like people assume they can't read, they can't, form thoughts that can be expressed in complex ways. They certainly can't write, all of that sort of stuff. And then come to find out that actually they had picked up things like writing and spelling and lessons all along the way. And how they communicate is by using letter boards that are held up in front of them at an angle that's easy for them to access, and then they point to letter by letter. And it is so hard for them because there's regulation issues and there's fine motor issues, and it takes like years of therapy for them to be able to do that. But once they can, you would just be astounded at how the things that come out of them. So I've seen this in person, and there are different variants of it. And so the therapy that I describe in my book is not It's pretty much the same as the other therapies. They're just like little things that are a little bit different. And I just gave it a different name so people wouldn't try to copy what I did, because I want people to who are interested in this to actually work with, therapists to know how to guide them rather than just give it a try in the way that I describe in the book and then give up because it doesn't work.
That's incredible. That's totally incredible. I want to talk about Mia. She's got this incredible voice. Like, her brother does not speak, but Mia like talks and talks and talks about everything. And not only that, she has footnotes about stuff, which I found so delightful. Footnotes and graphs and this and that. I wanted to know, when you were this is a how do you develop character question. When you were developing Mia, did you always know that she was going to have footnotes, or when you were writing, did you think, oh wait, I have to say more about that, and it just seemed to sort of fit in a footnote?
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought up the footnotes. And
Oh, I love them.
yeah, so Mia is such a quirky character. She is hyperverbal. She's hyperlexic. She was actually diagnosed as hyperlexic when she was younger, which a couple of my kids have been also, and so I know what that's like. And she is just a very analytical character, and she's cynical, and she has a dry humor, which
Yep.
and very sarcastic. And so I really, really love her, but she can be a lot. She can be kind of annoying from time to time. And she knows that about herself. And because her mom tells her all the time, like, Mia, you're being annoying. And so she's really working on that. And her way of working on this somewhat annoying tendency that she can have to kind of go off into side tangents is by putting those into footnotes. And I absolutely started like going on and on when I was writing in Mia's voice. I do this thing. I think you and I have emailed each other about this. Is this way that I have of writing, which comes from my theater background, of method writing, kind of similar to method acting,
Oh,
where you really try to inhabit a character's head. So inhabiting Mia's head for like 4 years, I sort of got to sort of thinking, really like her. But every once in a while, I would sort of take off the Mia hat and sort of try to look at it critically, use it, putting my author hat on and be like, okay, Mia, I'm really, really fascinated by this, but can we get back to the point? Like, what's happening with your father? Like, what happened? Like, well, where is he? Can we get back to that? And so at some point I sort of thought, aha, you know what? Here's what Mia's going to do. She's going to put these in footnotes so that people like her mom, who would be like reading, because she's imagining people like her mom reading this, and people like her who are, kind of annoyed by that, they can just skip right over them. And she, in fact, tells us, if you're the kind of person
right.
who doesn't like footnotes,
She does.
please skip them. It's okay,
She does. I
So
love. They were just so much fun. The first time I saw it, footnotes in a novel. And it worked. It was absolutely fascinating. Another fascinating thing is that Mia's mom is a translator, and yet she cannot translate her son.
no.
She cannot translate her son. Let me see what I wanted to also talk about the whole thing about how do we know how do we really know another person, who that person really is? I mean, who we find out who Eugene is at the end was just so completely dazzling to me. I mean, literally dazzling when you see all the lights to what I thought he was at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I thought, I was so grateful to have been able to read this book and take this journey and see he wasn't who I thought he was. And he wasn't who anybody thought he was. And then all of a sudden they discover it, and it's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. So when you know something like that, you would hope that every new person you approach with that kind of curiosity, that what people present is not always who they are.
Absolutely. And I feel like we do that with family members, especially, which is ironic because, and paradoxical because they're supposed to be the people that we know the most because we're so close to them and we have everyday contact with them for so long. And yet, I think when something like happens, like somebody going missing, and you are really forced to look at everything from fresh eyes,
Hmm.
you start realizing how much you didn't know, and
Right.
you are forced to start to look at them as people rather than as roles, rather than as these blobs that are your mom, your
Right.
caretaker, in this domestic context, or your annoying little brother or whatever it is, and when you do that, I think there can be the sense of guilt and regret mixed in, that you didn't know them, that you
Right.
have been overlooking them. And so that sense of shame and guilt and regret can also color the way that you feel, which, Mia's first line is, "We didn't call the police right away."
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And
Show
that,
first line.
oh, thank you. But it's that I hope that that would establish that sense of guilt and regret that she has, because that is everything she's telling us about what happened is seen through that lens of what could have been and what she should have known about her family all this entire time.
It's incredible because there's so many multi layers in this book, and the more they unpeel, it's almost like the book takes on real grandeur. Real grandeur.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I want
That's
to
so
talk to you about
nice.
being a lawyer. There was
Oh,
this
okay.
hilarious essay you wrote where you decided you couldn't do it anymore when you were in the middle of a grocery store. How's that?
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, when I started crying in the middle of Whole Foods. Actually, that was in the middle of my 4th career. So
Oh,
so being a writer is my 5th career. Being a lawyer was my first, and then I just
wow.
yeah, and then I decided I hated it, everything about it except for, like, the 5% of being a lawyer that is actually being in the courtroom, which I did love, and I did get to, like, play with that again, especially in Miracle Creek, so that was fun.
Right.
But, and then then I went into business, so I was a management consultant at McKinsey, and then I was a dot-com entrepreneur, and then I was a stay-at-home mom, and it was during my stay-at-home mom days. So I have 3 boys, and all 3 boys are fine now, but all
Oh,
of them
great.
had different diseases and conditions
Wow.
and all these medical things that were wrong, that we didn't know what was wrong with them for the longest time as babies. And so it was in the middle of that, when I was in the middle of shopping for them at Whole Foods, that I just kind of broke down and started crying, and that night is when I started writing for the first time,
So you didn't write
just for, like, almost like therapy.
you didn't write when you were a kid? You didn't have dreams of being a writer when you're
No,
wow, that makes it even more
no.
extraordinary. That's great. That's absolutely
Well,
great.
I was such an avid reader, though. I
Oh, right.
loved reading,
And stories.
and I was yes, and I was, like I talked about, I was in theater. So I went to this high school, like an arts academy, which has an amazing creative writing department. Never occurred to me to take a writing class. I thought writers were strange people. I was like, why would you want to sit by yourself and write all day when you could, like, be out there performing and singing and dancing? Like, I didn't get that. So go figure.
Now you get it though. Now you get the
Yes,
thing.
absolutely.
We have an audience question. We have actually oh no, wrong one. Here it is. Have you started another book, or are you just revealing in Happiness Falls? Can you write when you're on
Um, I
tour?
I'm gonna try. So I think because it's just been such a whirlwind for the first, like, I think this is my 3rd week. Um, so I haven't been able to work on anything else since then. but it is definitely something that I'm hoping that starting this weekend is when I'm going to start doing my morning writing again and doing at least like an hour of free writing a day, even when I'm on tour. I'm going to really try to get great about that. I remember being on tour with Miracle Creek, and Peter Heller, who is such a great
I
writer, whose
love
work
Peter
I love.
Heller.
I love
He's a
him
wonderful
too.
guy.
So great. And he had this thing, Caroline, I don't know if you do anything like this, but he said that he, even when he's on tour, he writes 2 hours every day. I don't know if I can do 2 hours, maybe one.
Uh-oh, we've got a freeze here. Let me see if I can correct this. And if I can't, I will tell you more about Angie's wonderful book. I will show you the cover while we see if this unfreezes. Oh, are you back? Okay.
Uh-oh.
Oh, great, you're
Is this
back.
better?
Great. I just, yep,
Okay.
I shut the
Sorry.
cover and I kept it with the dead space. Okay, so what does Peter
I'm
Heller
so
do?
sorry.
What does Peter Heller do
Hours
in
every
his
day,
writing?
regardless of what he's doing. And when he's at 2 hours, he just stops. He stops, even if he's in the middle of a sentence. And I was like, that's really interesting. So I might try that.
That's really interesting, because especially if I always try to stop when the writing is going good, because then I'll have something to look forward to the next day and I won't feel so depleted. Otherwise, I try to do 3 pages, 3 hours. I can't do anything more than that. It's just too completely exhausting.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
3
another question
pages is
for you.
huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us why you have an epigram for the Little Prince.
Oh, I'm so glad
Let me see
that
what
you
it is.
asked about this.
Let's
I
see. Wait,
love that.
I'm going to read it.
Okay, great.
Here it is. One sits down on a desert sand dune, sees nothing, hears nothing. Yet through the silence, something throbs and gleams. What makes the desert beautiful, said the little prince, is that somewhere it hides a well. Oh, that's really gorgeous.
Isn't
And
that
that's
gorgeous, beautiful? I know. I love The Little Prince. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's so much about the book, because all of us, you could say, have a well inside of us. Here's another audience question. Let's see. What writing advice would you give to your younger self? Probably nothing, because you were a lawyer.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, you're right. To my younger self, I don't know. I think that I'm actually pretty happy with the way things have turned out, but I think I would like I wish I had started when I was earlier, because I feel like I went from career to career looking for something, and what I was looking for is, and the characters talk about this in the book, is two different types of happiness like rolled into one thing. Both the micro, like day-to-day happiness,
Right.
being happy doing whatever your job is, and also that sense of satisfaction when you look at it, at a macro level. And I feel like fiction writing gives me that, and I wish I could have found it earlier instead of sort of like going from job to job looking for that. On the other hand, I mean, all the experiences that I had, I wouldn't give up, because I think they led me to this, because so many of my stories are sort of like, combination of all of those things. And can I say something more about the Little Prince thing?
Oh, yes, please do.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys saw, but the New York Times, they did a behind the bestseller list article on happiness, on like a profile, and it was
Oh,
about
great.
the epigrams, in the beginning of the book. And I think the title is something like, do you skip over epigraphs, like don't tell Angie Kim, or something like
Oh my
that.
God, that's
And it's great.
wonderful.
And yeah, so I talk about the Little Prince in fact, because there are three that I start the novel with, but the
Right.
Little Prince one, I say, is the one that's most dear to me, because it really is about what the book is about. And I also love The Little Prince because of the sort of ambiguous ending that you sort of decide for
Right.
yourself what the ending is and what really did happen to the little prince. And so actually the characters talk about that in the book. And there is a little bit of an ambiguity in the ending as well. And so I think Little Prince is, very special to me for all of those reasons. And it's really that idea of looking behind the
Right.
surface and not making assumptions, which is really what the book is about.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Things are far more layered and mysterious than we could believe. We have another audience question. This is so great. What was your favorite book as a child? Was it The Little Prince? Beside The Little Prince.
No, yeah, no, I don't think it was my favorite book as a child. I definitely remember that in Korean. And so I don't know if it's my favorite. So here's the problem. Here's the deal with me in Korea is that we were really, really poor. So there were three of us, my parents and me. I was an only child, and we lived in one tiny room of another family's house. And we didn't have indoor plumbing. We didn't have,
Wow.
we didn't have heating, like all of that sort of stuff. So it was really, and with space being so cramped, we didn't have beds or anything like that. We had like sleeping mats that we had to roll up so that we could, like eat and live in it for the rest of the day. And so I wasn't allowed to have books. And so, which was a problem because I was an avid reader. And so I would borrow like one book at a time, and I would reread it over and over again until I could borrow another book. And then for my 10th birthday, so, pretty close to the time that I came to the US, I got a set of these beautiful mysteries, these hardbound mysteries.
Oh,
I think my parents just got it because they looked pretty, and and it was something that they could afford. They probably bought it from like a used shop or a flea market or something like that. But even so, I treasured it, and I brought it back with me to the US. And for the first year or so, when I couldn't read anything else, I would read these over and over again.
I
And so I
love that.
still have, yes,
You
I
have them?
still yeah, I still have the one that's like has the Edgar Allan Poe, the black cat on the cover. That is like one that
Oh,
I just keep by me even now. So I don't know about favorite, but my most treasured thing and my most treasured book is definitely that bound version of the short mystery stories, including Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah.
it's so funny. I remember loving Edgar Allan Poe as well. I still love him now, but as a child, there was
Yeah.
something about it. It was scary, a way a child appreciates scary, I think.
Absolutely. And also the language,
The
the
language,
playfulness with the
yeah.
language and the rhythm. I've always been a musician, so the rhythm just seemed really just haunting to me. It would just like stick in my mind, you know?
Wait, you've always been a musician? I didn't know you were a musician. What do you
Yeah,
play?
yeah, 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 yeah. So
Oh,
I'm a pian
excellent. Tell us.
yeah, yeah, I'm a pianist. So at Interlochen, I double majored in theater and piano, and I did musical theater on the theater end. And then in college, I was in those singing groups that goes all over the place. Angie's a pianist here, so funny. Yes, but and there's a lot about music in Happiness Falls too, because I do feel like there's so much about sort of about the way that we tell the way that we explore emotions through musical compositions is very similar to how we tell stories. And so Mia, the protagonist in the narrator in the book, is a piano not a pianist. She's a musician, she's a violinist and a composer as well, and she talks a lot about music and musical theory and bass line and all of that sort of stuff too.
Okay, we have time for one last question. And this
Oh.
is a question that I always ask because I ask myself this every day. So I always want to know what other writers are going to answer. Angie Kim, what's obsessing you now and why?
Ooh, what's obsessing me? Well, what's obsessing me is I think the plight of my students who are these non-speakers. I'm still obsessed with that. I explore that a lot in the book. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is how so many this deeply seated assumption that equates oral fluency with intelligence is so deeply seated that people have a hard time believing it, and they just kind of poo-poo it. And so it's really interesting to me because I talk about these doubters, but even as my book has come out and I've been talking about this, I've been seeing on social media and things like that, people like saying, oh, this poor author, she must be being duped by this community, you know,
Really?
these
Wow.
videos of these autistic kids, like, spelling out these gorgeous things, they must be doctored and things like that. And it's just infuriating. And so one of the things that I've been doing is involving them more. So in my DC launch and my Northern Virginia launch, I had one of my students actually in
Great.
conversation with me on the stage.
Fabulous. That is
And
fabulous.
yeah, I'm so excited. I've been just so crazed with, events and stuff. So I haven't had a chance to sort of like pull it together. But I cannot wait to share that. And also the day after my pub day, Good Morning America came down to Northern Virginia and actually came to one of our classes and did a taping.
Fabulous.
And so that's
Wonderful.
airing actually tomorrow. That's airing
Oh,
tomorrow
that's
on Good Morning
incredible.
America.
Let me just look
Yeah.
ahead because tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Yeah. At the eight
Tomorrow,
o'clock hour. And
Good Morning
I am
America
so
at
excited for
8
people to see
with
that
Angie
because Juju
Teacher
Chang, who
Class.
was the anchor who, introduced my book for Good Morning America, she was there and she scribed like some of the things that they were writing on these letter boards. And I thought she and the camera crew were just going to burst out crying. They were so moved and touched. And I cannot wait to see this. And I can't wait for the world to see it. So, anyway, so you asked what's obsessing me is
That's
I want to know how those doubters and those naysayers are going to react to things like that. They'll probably just ignore it, but I'm just so curious about their reactions and the reactions of the world in general. So I'm really, really excited.
that's great. That is absolutely astonishing. That's sort of like really putting something out into the world beside art, which is a big thing, but so helpful. I can't wait to see the video. So I want to tell everybody out there, don't forget, you can buy Angie's book at Barnes and Nobles, where she is right now, or you can go to
Yay. Yay.
bookshop.org, wherever books are sold. Thank you so much for being here. Tell your friends that this video it'll live forever on our YouTube station for A Mighty Blaze, and come back next week for more great guests. And I want to thank all of you and your questions, and especially I want to thank Angie Kin. I've been so thrilled to read everything you've written, and this book is gorgeous. Gorgeous cover, gorgeous inside, really, 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 really great. So I'll see all of you next time. And Angie, you just stick around for a second.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you.